I used to live in a Middle Eastern neighborhood, and down the hill from where I lived there was a mosque, and further down the hill there was a Christian church. And this was a while ago, so like people were still super afraid of Muslims and stuff like that, and they were really open about it. And I remember, like, I was in sixth grade. I remember going to school one day and seeing on the mosque that I passed every day, "Go home under God, not Allah." And looked at it, oh, vandalism. And I think about it now, and it's interesting to me because the person who wrote it, he was my friend's brother, who was like really involved with the Christian church that was down the street. And what's interesting to me is that it just shows how little we know about Islam, and just how uninformed we are. And it's unfortunate because as Christians we're called to love everybody and make followers out of all the people, and it's hard to do that when the world views you and your religion as ignorant, and that's how we're viewed. So the reason I'm here today is because I want to teach you about Islam, kind of give you some insight, and to do that I think it's important that you know about the history, the history of Islam, so its founder, its founding, and the Quran. Then I think it's important that you know about jihad and the 5 pillars of Islam, and then finally I want to separate jihad and radical jihad. Radical jihad is what we see on the news a lot, and we confuse the two because they're totally different things. So you hear people say, "Oh, Islam started off as a violent religion," and yeah, it is true. Islam did have a violent origin. It started with a war between 2 tribes called Mecca and Medina. Medina was a monotheistic tribe, and that's where Muhammad was from, the founder of Islam. And Mecca was polytheistic, and they controlled the city of Mecca. And the reason Mecca was so important, well, this is what they were fighting over. They were fighting over who could control Mecca. And the reason it's so important is because Mecca was a trading hub, and if you could capture Mecca, you could spread your influence quicker. So that's what they were fighting for. And Muhammad, on the side of Medina, he was outnumbered. He didn't have the good position that the people of Mecca did, and he prayed to Allah that he would have victory, despite the odds. And he ended up capturing Mecca and spreading his influence. That's why we don't worship, or Muslims don't worship the Meccan gods. They worship Allah. So later in his life, Muhammad, he got old, and this is when the Quran came. And the story is that Muhammad was sitting in a cave praying, and the angel Gabriel came down and gave him the Quran. And that's a nice story and all, but in reality, like most generals that come from like the Middle East and Asia, when they retire from their military career, they go into philosophy and stuff like that. And they go into philosophy and reflect on the virtues of peace and spirituality. And that's what Muhammad was doing. And he was no doubt influenced by the surrounding cultures, which is why Islam is so similar to Christianity and Judaism in its teachings. Like, they have similar stories also. And that gets me to the next point that I want to talk about, which is the teachings of Islam. So the 5 pillars of Islam. The 5 pillars of Islam, they're very, very similar to the fruits of the Spirit in Christianity, or the 10 Commandments in Christianity and Judaism. They emphasize, they teach sacrifice, loyalty to God and your family, prayer, mercy, and fasting. And nowhere in these 5 pillars does it say anything about war and violence. And we think about that a lot when we think about Islam. The 5 pillars are the foundation for what's called jihad. Jihad is, a lot of people believe it means holy war, but it means struggle for the will of God. And I don't know if you know anything about Middle Eastern language, like specifically Farsi. They have 5 different words for an idea. Well, this is just an exaggeration or rough number. They have many different words for a single idea. Abstract idea. So struggle, it's jihad. And when they say jihad, they don't mean holy war like I was saying. It means like going out of your way to do something to help others. Sacrifice, they sacrificing your time or your money to go and help a homeless shelter or something like that. So it doesn't mean war again. And it's very similar to what we do at a church. We have our donations to the homeless shelters, and we go on our mission trips and stuff like that. And they do the exact same things, except they're Muslim. That's the only difference between us and Muslims. A lot of people, they say that the Quran and the Bible are the exact same thing, but they're not. If you read the Quran, it's very similar in its stories, and its teachings, they remain the same, but it's just different emphasis, and that's what gets us so nervous as Christians, that we don't know this and we haven't taken the time out to look and see what it says. So we confuse it with the violent parts of Islam, and that's what I want to talk about next. I want to separate the violence and the peaceful side of Islam, the violent and the peaceful side of Islam, into two separate groups. Right? There's jihad, what I just told you about, so helping others, struggling for the will of God. Then there's radical jihad, and that's what you see a lot of on the news, with guys blowing themselves up in the name of Allah. It looks bad. So imagine if someone were to blow themselves up in the name of Jesus Christ, it would look bad for us as a whole. It's the same with Muslims. They're not all terrorists. There's a couple of them that are terrorists. And I was saying the 5 pillars of Islam are the teachings of jihad, and then this radical jihad is what's classified by a lot of imams. Those are the religious rulers or the religious leaders of a mosque. They call it the 6th pillar of jihad, or the 6th pillar of Islam. The 6th pillar of Islam emphasizes siege and conquest and preaching through the word, preaching through the sword. So, follow what I say or I'll kill you. And it doesn't have a long-term goal really. It's just short-term conquest. And that's what these terrorist groups follow. And they don't have a religious agenda really. It's more of a political and economic agenda. And it's not Islam. That's why they focus so much on the United States and Europe as opposed to Latin America and South Africa, where there's a lot of Christians. It's because of our economies and our freedoms, and also because we interrupt their source of income. These terrorist groups, they operate a lot like the drug cartels in Latin America. They deal out narcotics and weapons, and we don't take that, so we intercept it and kill them. And that'll fuel a lot of anger towards us, and which is why they act the way they do. Also, the reason they use Islam as a banner is because religion is a very strong force when uniting groups of people. If you were to tell someone, hey, give us your son, we're going to use him to help us deal drugs and weapons to other countries, you probably wouldn't gain much support from a religious group. But if you were to say something like, hey, give us your son, he's doing the will of God, you might get a little more support. These people, they're not stupid. They know how to manipulate, and the whole 72 virgins thing that they say, that the whole myth about that's not we didn't make that up. That's something that these radical groups say to their recruits just to motivate them. And I was reading the Quran, and I didn't see anywhere where it said 72 virgins in heaven for you if you kill yourself. They take the whole pillar of sacrifice from the 5 pillars of Islam, and they twist it around so it becomes a violent sacrifice. They take it so it means sacrificing yourself to kill others, and then they indoctrinate people. So, you got to separate the two. There's jihad, helping your community, jihad, blowing stuff up. So, pretty much that's what I've got to say to you. Just think and learn about things before you go and criticize them. And I talked to you about the history of Islam, its founding and its founder, the Quran. Or the Quran is the book. Its founder, Muhammad. I talked to you about those. I talked to you about jihad, or the 5 pillars of Islam. And then I talked to you about jihad and what radical jihad is and how the two are different. So, just hope you listened. Thank you.